Is this the wilderness life you've been yearning for? To stock up on meat for the winter, taking down a 1,000-pound bison with a single shot. If you get tired of that, there are tender and delicious wild ducks. And in your spare time, you can rely on furs to make a living. It's a life of true leisure and freedom. Kodiak Island, in southern Alaska, is a place where beauty and danger coexist. Mike is a bear hunting guide who lives side by side with his hunting dog. He starts his day just as dawn breaks. Today's mission is to go hunting to hoard the meat needed for the winter. Last year's snowstorm caused a massive die-off of deer, so this time he's heading to the neighboring coast, hoping the deer herds there haven't been heavily decimated. This is Mike's newly purchased boat, featuring an amphibious design. With the push of a button, it can transform from a boat into a vehicle. It utilizes a triple hydraulic power system and is equipped with deep tread tires to handle various rugged terrains. Once it touches the seawater, the wheels retract like landing gear, allowing it to navigate the ocean freely. The waves are a bit rough today, feeling like the prelude to a storm, and thick fog has reduced visibility. Fortunately, the boat is equipped with a depth sounder. When it gets too close to the rocks, it beeps, allowing Mike to adjust his course in time. The surrounding coastline is completely rocky, so he decides to push further in to find a safer landing spot. As a light rain begins to fall, a storm is clearly approaching. He finds a suitable landing spot and prepares to lower the wheels. But, for some reason, the hydraulic system won't start. Mike drops the anchor to secure the boat in place and starts looking for the problem. Water might have gotten into the lines. He takes out a handy bottle of antifreeze made of methanol, which can absorb water contaminating the fuel lines. After waiting a moment, Mike restarts the system, and this time, it works without a hitch. Bumping along, he drives onto the shore and stops at a higher elevation. Mike drapes a tarp over the boat and then starts looking for firewood. He unexpectedly finds an old buoy, which makes a great container for a fire. He uses his knife to cut an opening at the top and lights a fire inside. The flames grow stronger, finally bringing him a touch of warmth. He will spend the night here and begin the hunt tomorrow. The next morning, Mike wakes up early and walks along the beach with his dog. The tide has just receded, and deer might come down to enjoy their breakfast, feeding on kelp and seaweed. His food reserves at home are down to just over 10 pounds of salmon. Without meat, this winter will be agonizing. Hunting season is coming to an end, making this his last planned hunt. Mike decides to sit and wait. A few seabirds watch curiously nearby. He takes out his binoculars for a grid search. He doesn't spot any deer, but he does find a few seals. They don't seem afraid of humans at all. After waiting a while with no sign of his target, Mike decides to climb the hillside to look for tracks. He quickly finds a severed deer leg, but this isn't the sight he was hoping for. If there are too many predators here, it's highly detrimental to the deer population's growth. Now, Mike prepares to climb higher up the mountain to investigate. To lighten his load, he leaves most of his gear up in a tree, then leads his dog up the mountain. The snow on the mountain is thick, severely slowing Mike down. The wind is also fierce, stinging his face. Man and dog climb with great difficulty. Soon, he spots a hoof print in the snow. This discovery is a huge morale booster. Gathering his energy, he pushes all the way to the peak in one breath. The good news is that he immediately spots a lone deer. Unfortunately, the distance is too great, well beyond his shooting range. At the same time, Mike realizes a problem. It's a doe. While hunting her would provide meat, it would further damage the already dwindling deer population. Because of this, Mike decides to give up the hunt, leaving the herd ample room to recover. He returns to his boat, ready to head back to the woodlands, and begins rethinking his plan for acquiring food. A few days pass in the blink of an eye. Taking advantage of the clear weather, Mike sets out once again on his journey to find food. 25 miles away from home is Whale Island, known for its vast network of streams. It attracts an abundance of birds, as well as animals like otters and beavers that make their homes here. It doesn't take long before he enters a tributary. The water here is a bit shallow. Slightly concerned, Mike measures the depth to ensure he won't run aground, travels a bit further, and finally finds a suitable landing spot. Mike grabs his rifle and walks into the woods. There is a clear stream here, and by walking upstream, he can find its source. Not far along, a pond appears before him, much larger than he imagined. On the bank stands a large tree with more than half of its bark gnawed off. At first glance, it's clearly the work of a beaver. They must be starving. Otherwise, they wouldn't chew on spruce bark. Experience tells Mike that there's a beaver lodge here, housing a large number of beavers. Therefore, trapping beavers is a good option right now. There's an animal trail here, one of the paths the beavers use to get in and out. Mike decides to set a trap here. He takes out a body grip trap, tinkers with it a bit, and secures it in place with some sticks. This trap will serve as a test run. If it catches something tomorrow, Mike will stay and continue trapping. If not, he'll look for the next location. To increase the chances of a successful test, he sets up as many traps as possible nearby. After finishing up, he heads back to the river to look for dinner. He happens to see a few ducks flying past. Walking forward, he comes across a lone duck preparing to take off, and Mike takes it down with a single shot. Afterwards, Mike needs to find a place to spend the night. There are some public hunting cabins around here. Seeing a buoy hanging from a tree, he knows it's likely the marker for a cabin. Just as he arrives, he spots bear prints on the ground, reminding him to stay extra cautious. He slowly pushes open the door. Fortunately, it's safe inside. Mike gets a fire going and starts preparing a delicious dinner. When the duck is about medium well, he and his dog share the meal. The taste is absolutely fantastic, and as he eats, he looks forward to tomorrow's harvest. Hoping the beaver trap would bring him a surprise, Mike woke up the next day and stepped outside with his hunting dog. He ended up seeing fox tracks in the yard. Not surprisingly, the smell of the roasted meat had attracted them. Mike planned to deal with it when he returned in the evening. Right now, his top priority was checking the traps. Yesterday, he had placed several traps by the pond and stream to scout the local game. Arriving at the first location, a surprise was indeed waiting for him. An otter was lying in the trap. The hound walked up and sniffed it. Mike noticed a line of tracks on the ground nearby. It seemed the otter had come from that direction. This was a fully grown adult. Once the pelt was tanned and dried, it could bring in about $200. Mike reset the trap and moved on to check the others. The fresh snow from last night provided a distinct advantage, allowing him to see animal tracks at a glance, which was incredibly helpful for his trapping efforts. The stream ahead was the site of the second trap, but unfortunately, it had vanished into thin air. Just then, Mike discovered bear prints in the nearby snow. It seemed that guy had stolen his catch. This instantly made Mike furious. It was bad enough that the blasted bear had stolen the prey, but it had also taken the trap with it. It seemed this area was no longer suitable for setting traps, as the bear would surely return to enjoy another free buffet. Mike still had 6 more traps to check. Soon, his mood turned from cloudy to sunny, as a beaver was caught in the next one. Mike lifted it for inspection. It was plump and strong, an exceptionally high-quality catch. It looked like there was a beaver family living here. A beaver dam usually houses over a dozen beavers. Packing away his catch, Mike continued his rounds, but unfortunately, the remaining traps yielded nothing. One trap came close to succeeding, but judging from the tracks, 3 animals had perfectly bypassed the device. Mike decided to readjust it, aiming to give those cunning critters a surprise. Back at the hunting cabin, Mike needed to start processing the beaver, stripping the pelt before it could spoil. Tossing the beaver onto the cutting board, the dog eyed the prey covetously. He first cut off the beaver's feet, then sliced upwards along the belly. It didn't take long to perfectly skin the entire pelt. That was another $200 in the bag. Because the island was heavily populated with brown bears, the beaver carcass couldn't be left inside, lest it attract terrifying predators in the middle of the night. However, Mike still cut off a hind leg to make dinner for his dog. He then removed the beaver's scent glands, which he planned to use to trap foxes. He tied the gland to a trap and secured it to a fallen tree. Afterward, he went back inside to continue processing the otter pelt. Otters are different from beavers, and the skinning method varies significantly. After opening up the tail, the animal has to be hung up. By carefully slicing the skin along the joints, the pelt can finally be peeled off intact. Holding the beaver pelt in one hand and the otter pelt in the other, harvesting 2 furs in a single day left Mike's eyes filled with satisfaction. These pelts could be sold to tourists or sent to an auction house for trading. Riding this wave of excitement, he decided to check the fox trap. It had only been set for a few hours. Perhaps Lady Luck was smiling upon him today, because a fox was clearly lying in the trap, and a beautiful red fox at that. It is considered one of the rarest pelts, with a value far exceeding that of a beaver's. This prompted Mike to make a major decision. He would continue staying on this island until he filled his boat with furs. Some time passed. A bush plane was flying over a treacherous, rocky area, carrying the pilot and Mike. As of yet, he still hadn't secured his winter meat. Because the deer herds had suffered a natural disaster, their numbers hadn't recovered to normal levels. Mike needed to travel to a much more remote area to hunt. In the far west of the archipelago lies a small island that, over 100 years ago, was a gathering place for whalers and fur traders. At that time, cattle were brought to the island as a food source for these people. Today, the island is uninhabited year-round, and these cattle have returned to nature, growing wildly into feral herds. The key is that anyone can harvest this beef. Since the hunting season had ended, Mike only managed to secure a one-day hunting permit. No matter the outcome, he had to leave on the plane tomorrow. Finally, the plane landed steadily on the water, the commotion startling some seabirds. It seemed the local resources were quite abundant. After bidding the pilot farewell, Mike officially set foot on the island. To assess the situation, he planned to climb the nearby hillside first. Along the way, he saw some skeletal remains, clearly the victims of a kill. It seemed wild beasts also inhabited this place. Mike then reached the high ground, searching everywhere for signs of the cattle herd. He hoped to spot his target close to the beach. If it was too far away, even a successful hunt would make it incredibly difficult to transport the meat back. After some searching, his long-awaited target appeared, though the distance was beyond his shooting range. But he had no choice and no time to hesitate. He chased in the direction of the herd. Before long, he spotted a lone bull about 100 yards away. Mike decided to make it his target. Holding his rifle, he slowly lay down and took aim. Waiting for the perfect angle, Mike dropped the bull to the ground with a single shot. Walking up to it, the prey had already stopped breathing. This bull could provide at least 500 pounds of meat. Mike needed to butcher it quickly. There was only a little over an hour left until sunset. To cut through the bone, he used a sharp hacksaw, which made a grinding noise with every pull. At that moment, a fox, drawn by the smell of blood, approached. Seeing Mike radiating a fierce presence, it didn't dare come close. Compared to a weak fox, he was far more worried about brown bears or a cunning pack of wolves. Rushing against the clock, he managed to pack up most of the meat. Since the plane wouldn't arrive until tomorrow, Mike covered the meat with a tarp. However, he couldn't mask the scent, which might attract predators tonight. Mike planned to campone 100 yards away so he could protect himself while being close enough to defend his catch at a moment's notice. He built a simple shelter out of the tarp and some wood, then crawled inside to rest. When the first light of the next day arrived, Mike woke from his sleep. He immediately went to check on his catch and found everything perfectly intact. Today, he had to haul the beef to the rendezvous point, and he could only carry a little over 100 pounds at a time. Because of this, he had to make 5 trips to carry it all back. Constantly climbing the hills along the way was a massive drain on his stamina. Mike stopped to gasp for air, somewhat regretting traveling this far just to hunt a bull. At this rate, it would be extremely difficult to bring all the meat home. Time ticked by, and 3 hours passed before he completed just one round trip. Based on his scheduled pickup time, he could only haul one more load, which left him feeling very frustrated. After some thought, he decided on a risky approach, transporting the beef by sea. But he needed to wait for high tide. This would be his only chance. In the meantime, he had to do some prep work. He pulled out an inflatable raft, pumped it full of air, and then loaded the beef onto it piece by piece, tying everything down securely. Mike grabbed the rope and walked down along the shore. With the help of the water's buoyancy, pulling the raft felt incredibly effortless. The only trouble was that the underwater area was littered with rocks, making the trek a bit arduous. But compared to that, the real challenge was the steep cliffs, where there was simply no easy place to find footing. Coupled with the crashing waves, Mike endured a lot of hardship. Fortunately, he managed to struggle through this treacherous stretch. The rest of the journey was much smoother, and a few hours later, he arrived at the rendezvous point. He was already half an hour past the agreed time, yet the plane was nowhere to be seen. Just as Mike started to worry, the plane finally arrived. Now, he could take his hard-earned spoils home. Sometime later, early in the morning, Mike brewed a cup of tea to quench his thirst. Today's task was to repair his hunting cabin. He is a bear hunting guide, and every bear hunting season, tourists flock here to experience the thrill of the hunt. With only 10 days left before the first batch of tourists arrived, he had to get to work. First, Mike nailed some wooden furring strips to the walls and took measurements. Next, he cut aluminum panels into the desired shapes, fitted them into place, and found they matched perfectly. He then used a power drill to secure them to the wall. Using the same method, he cladded the entire wall. The aluminum panels would help retain heat inside and also act as a deterrent against wild beasts who love to scavenge around hunting cabins. And the ultimate weapon against brown bears? A board covered in sharp nails. Placing it at the door would surely leave any visiting brown bear with an unforgettable memory. The second step in repairing the cabin was solving the heating issue. Mike moved a stove inside. Now he needed to assemble the stovepipe, using a hole in the wall as the chimney exit. He drove screws in to secure the pipe, completing the indoor assembly, then went outside to connect the exterior section. Afterward, he brought in some firewood to test the stove's draft. Gradually, wisps of smoke rose from the chimney. Mike checked inside. No smoke was leaking from the pipes, meaning it was working perfectly. Considering the cabin lacked a refrigerator, Mike decided to build one. He cut a rectangular opening in the wall, designed a wooden box frame, and assembled it. Sliding it into the wall, he found the cut was a perfect fit. Back inside, Mike inserted a plastic cooler bin into the frame. It was exactly the result he wanted. In wilderness survival, food and water are the most critical elements. Mike needed to install a water collection system. He found a plastic barrel and started modifying it, cutting an inlet at the top and designing 2 outlets, one at the bottom and an overflow near the top. He drilled a hole in the wall and inserted a pipe, completing the assembly. Water would flow in from the top and store in the barrel, while a faucet extended from the bottom. If rainfall exceeded 40 gallons, the excess water would drain outside through the side pipe. Next, Mike went outside and diagonally attached a rain gutter along the roof's lower edge to catch the water. To test it, he poured a bucket of water onto the roof to simulate rain. Returning inside, he found the barrel had successfully collected the water. He turned on the faucet, and the water flowed out smoothly. With everything ready, Mike could now peacefully await the arrival of his tourists. Over in the Sawtooth Mountains of Idaho, Harry and Kid run a ranch. Last year, they bought 40 cows, and the calves have now grown up. Come winter, meat becomes extremely scarce, and prices can skyrocket to several times the usual amount. To prepare, the 2 brothers plan to build a smokehouse to preserve their meat and prevent it from spoiling. While the ground wasn't completely frozen yet, they needed to clear a space right up against a steep hillside to block the bitter north wind. The bad news was that the soil was rock hard. To save energy, they decided to thaw it with fire. They chopped a massive amount of firewood, and once the coals were hot, added 2 large logs on top. The fire burned fiercely for 2 hours. After clearing away the charcoal, they resumed digging, which was noticeably easier this time. After digging for quite a while, Kid measured the area and confirmed the space was sufficient. To prevent a landslide, they laid down a metal base, built a wooden retaining wall, and propped it up with large stones. Just as they were busy working, an accident occurred. The dirt bank collapsed, sending a heavy load of soil crashing down onto Kid. He looked a bit battered, but thankfully, he wasn't injured. After calming their nerves, they got back to work. They built the wall higher while backfilling it with dirt to stabilize the entire structure. Next came the foundation. They used crosties treated with creosote, which provided strong rot resistance. They arranged them into a rectangle and began stacking pine logs for the walls. They carved notches into the ends of each log to ensure a tight fit. For added stability, they drove extra long iron spikes into the joints. Step by step, the high walls were stacked, and the cabin gradually took shape. Having built many similar structures in the past, the 2 were highly proficient. Soon, only the roof remained. They cut pieces of rebar and forged them into spikes, driving them into the logs while leaving half a foot exposed to support the next tier. They continued this process until the roof was completely sealed. With that, the smokehouse was successfully completed, leaving them both highly satisfied. A smokehouse isn't complete without a wood-burning stove. The next day, they went to their workshop, where they had 2 intact oil drums, perfect for a conversion. They first cut a rectangular opening at the top of one drum and welded 4 legs to the side. Before long, it looked like a proper stove. Then, Kid attached a door to the opening. The plan was to stack the 2 drums together and connect them with a pipe in the middle. After some assembly, a dual-drum combustion stove was born. They moved it outside the smokehouse. To test out their new setup, they grabbed their gear and went hunting. Just then, a pheasant flew past, instantly catching their attention. Kid immediately took aim and shot it down. His marksmanship was absolutely explosive. His brother Harry was no slouch either. By the end of the day, they had bagged a total of 3 plump, delicious pheasants. They brought the birds back to the smokehouse and gathered a large amount of apple wood to light the stove. The entire smoking process would last 12 hours. This wood not only burns slowly but also releases a fragrant aroma. Soon, smoke began to fill the smokehouse. Seeing everything going smoothly, Kid got ready to process the pheasants. These were all roosters, boasting beautiful plumage. Kid roughly stripped off the skin. Harry opened the door, and a thick cloud of smoke instantly billowed out. Holding his breath, he hung the meat on the wooden racks, his eyes tearing up from the heavy smoke. The 2 quickly escaped and slammed the door shut. The successful construction of the smokehouse signaled that their operation was reaching a new peak. After moving for a while, Harry signaled to stop. It turned out there were a few bison right in front of them. However, judging from the bison's movements, it was definitely hit. They decided to track it. The bison suddenly stood up. Kid quickly fired a follow-up shot. The bison tried to flee again, but its injuries were too severe. Tied everything down. Another river appeared. The team entered the water one by one. The current here was much swifter, turning the scene into a chaotic scramble. During the crossing, the mule asked if they couldn't get warm in time, it would be life-threatening. They immediately built a fire. Taking off his soaking wet pants, Harry revealed his fetching red long johns. The two wrung out their socks and hung them on a nearby branch. Once their bodies warmed up a bit, Kid tried to find the lost, and a $500 bison head was definitely not something to abandon. Probing the water with a stick, he felt something at the bottom. To hook it, Kid used a forked branch to craft a tool resembling a trident, tying it to a long pole with a rope. Kid waded back into the river and started fishing for it. Smokehouse, and hung the cuts of meat on the walls to smoke. They had to speed up the process. The fragrant applewood would give the smoked meat a special flavor. Soon, thick smoke billowed from the cracks. This process would take several days. Now, they had to process the bison hide. The untanned pelt was still incredibly heavy.